I'm back.
Hey, Steve, how are you? I can see you're moving.
Good. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I'm just going to listen in. I'm driving, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, that's good. I'm sure you're a good multitasker, but we don't want to see you drive and have to conduct this meeting.
Just going to put myself on mute.
Okay. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Eric, how are you?
How are you?
Good.
Fantastic. You're not moving like Steve is, which is good. You're stationary.
I'm stationary. I'm always on the move, but today I'm stationary.
No plane rides.
Yeah, right.
That was yesterday. I flew out of the got a storm coming in, so we were down at our place in Naples, and the weather down there was getting pretty ugly yesterday. So I figured I better get out of there.
Yeah.
We're in South Carolina now.
It's beautiful up here today.
So I hear. Like 70?
Yeah, 70 and 73 today, and a couple more days of this, and then I think it all comes to an end. But we'll enjoy it while we got it.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna miss. I'll be back next week.
Oh. Okay, well, it's 5 o'clock. Then, do we have who do we have on the call?
No, we're still missing Vicky, Janae, and Jeff is not attending. So we still need, I believe, one more.
Okay, one more. Okay, we'll wait a minute or so. Hi, Betty. Good.
Okay, now Janae is entering, so.
Oh, good.
Hi, Mac. How are you?
Oh,
Great.
we
How
have
are you?
Maurice too, so we're complete.
We're complete. Excellent. Well, welcome you all to our Ways and Means Committee meeting, and on this November 9th. It feels like May 9th, but for those of us here in the Northeast, but we'll take it, right? Why don't we call the meeting to order and take the roll?
Yes. Mary Kate Murin.
Present.
Max Starks.
Present.
Vicky Krause. Eric Hagopian.
Here.
Maurice Lindsay.
I'm here.
Jeff Sattler. And Janae McDonald.
Present.
Thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you, Nene. I appreciate that. And why don't we jump right into our fiscal year 2020 budget detail? Jason Cohen.
Sure. Can we advance one more slide, please? Great. We just put a recap together to give you guys a high-level overview of how we ended up in fiscal year 20. We were at about $3,112,000 in the positive. So basically that was made up of some additional revenues, which were above what we originally budgeted. We had some state funding that came in a little bit higher than we originally budgeted. We also had some trust revenues that were higher than we budgeted by about $244,000. That was mostly made up of indirect revenues we received from grants, as well as some foundation funding that we received for some specific initiatives. In expenses, we came in less than budgeted. Some of the main areas where that was operating and utilities, due to the fact that we were operating remotely for the last quarter. We had significant amount of operating underspending. For example, there was less meetings on campus, less travel, less people on campus also meant less utilities usage. Our contingency also came in under budget. And basically the COVID expenses in FY20 were less than anticipated. And then we had facilities underspending as well. And basically that had to do with the cosmetology relocation being suspended, as well as the fire escapes project being deferred to FY21.
Hey, Jason?
Yes.
So my only question in this, in the expense section here is the fire escapes. I mean, I get the deferment, but is it our call to defer that, or is that something we need to do? Is that a mandatory? So it's scheduled at a certain time where it needs to happen, or and why would we defer this? This might be a good time to actually do it when there's not many folks on campus.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, we deferred this at the end of last year, and we put that right back into our budget in FY21. We don't want to take any chances with life safety. So although it wasn't scheduled that it absolutely had to be done ASAP, we wanted to make sure that we put that right back in FY21 to make sure that we take care of that need.
Okay, so it wasn't a mandatory update that we needed to do, and we pushed it. It was something that kind of at our call that we decided to move it. And yeah, but that the whole thing about the timing of it, doing it this year versus next year, what was the thinking around that? I mean, you might not know. I know you're just jumping in the game here, so I appreciate.
Yeah, no, I think we were, we always have roll forward with our capital projects. And those were a couple of areas where we could kind of cut back. So we weren't rolling so much forward into FY21. And I can tell you the reason behind bringing it back in FY21. When we relooked at our budget, with our assumptions with the 9C cuts and whatnot, what we know so far, we figured we probably should bring this back, as soon as possible, so that we could get this taken care of, especially since it's looking like funding is available in 21.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I could tell you. I could give you more and talk to facilities if you like as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it, Jason.
Can we advance the slide, please? So this is just a line by line breakdown of all of our different variances. Does anyone have any questions on this sheet?
None for me.
Okay, can we please advance to the next? And one more. All right, so this is the actual revenue and spending analysis that we put in for the year end. You can see that we ended up all the way down on the bottom in that middle section, 3,112,000 in the positive. We have all the way in that right-hand section was our projection that we had at the beginning of July. So we actually beat our projection. But any questions on this slide?
Yeah, I was interested in as I was going through this, that the whole right section, so I was, my note to myself was, what's the purpose of this? So essentially it's to show that at the beginning of July, we came in $2 million better than what we thought at the beginning of July. So I was actually comparing, the column of what's our actual, the budget, versus kind of where we landed, right? As the kind of the point I was more focused on, because that right section would speak to our accuracy in forecasting, right? That's the reason why you would include this. Right. And I would say being $2 million off I would be suspect in terms of my grading, in terms of, but given COVID and everything, it's kind of tough to estimate. I was curious what the point of showing that column. But I guess overall, as I looked at this, and so $3.1 million of excess, right, which is obviously a good place to be, which essentially we could add to our reserves, right? So as we talk about other potential uses of capital, it's good to know that we've got $3 million of potential, from the 2020 year.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Any other thoughts or questions on this slide?
None for me.
All right. Great. John, can we move to the next one, please? All right. So this is just a recap of our facilities capital spending for FY21. You can see that there was about $2.2 million in spending. 859,000 of that was from prior year roll forward. 1.3 was for the FY20 budgeted spending. And you can see that kind of, if you follow that down below a little bit more, we rolled about $2 million into FY21 for additional capital projects.
Yeah, a couple questions from me on this. So
Yes.
line 38 is described as total fiscal year 2020 facilities cuts and deferments of $1 million.
Right. Yep.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that was the reduction of roll forward that we did based on that suspended cosmetology project, as well as those fire escapes.
Okay, so how do I then think about because it says roll forward to fiscal year 20, I think that's 21, right? So on the
yeah.
end, okay. All right, yeah, I think that kind of cleans it up for me, because as I'm trying to follow the math, I'm, in my mind, row 37 is $3.1 million of funds that we didn't spend, that we budgeted to spend.
Right.
And then we took this $1.1 million of cuts or deferments out, and leaves us with $2.1 million to go to the future year.
Yes.
But the $1.1 million, so what are we doing with that? Like what's happening with that money? We didn't incur it. We didn't spend it.
Correct. We didn't spend it. So it's essentially would stay in reserves. So instead of it rolling forward into FY21, where it would have brought it up to about $3 million in roll forward, it would just stay in those reserves.
Right. So on a previous slide where we were talking about the $3 million of excess just from our actual results relative to revenue versus expenses, here's another $1 million that we're saying, we could put into reserves.
Right. And it was factored into that number, actually. So if we didn't reduce these facilities projects, by those amounts, it would have been $2 million that we would have had in excess on that previous sheet.
So this $1.1 million is not additive to the $3 million we had on it from the previous slide.
Correct. It's included. It's included. Part of that line item.
Okay.
That clears that up for me too, because I was curious about that as well.
And if we can go back one slide, you should be able to see that. So you can see on line 20, the underspending was really that $1,062,000. I'm sorry, 26. It's a little small on my screen.
Yep. Okay. Excellent.
Great.
Those are all my questions.
Excellent. Any other thoughts, questions? Great. I think we can move to the next slide, please. And Dorothy will be explaining this next section to you.
Yeah, if you can go to the next one, John.
Hi, Dorothy.
Hello there. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so here is our required fourth quarter trust fund reports. Encompasses the entire fiscal year of 2020. So we have broken down into three sections: the general education trust fund, the health trust fund, and the capital improvement fund. So were there any questions on this particular report?
None for me. Things look favorable, so I didn't have any questions.
If you want to advance, let's see, to the next one, there's your health trust fund. And then the next one is capital improvement. And then next one. So then we have the vendor expenditures report, which we're required to report on expenditures exceeding the 20,000 threshold year to date. Any questions on this one?
Actually, I did have a question on the prior slide, the capital improvement trust fund.
Sure.
So we got the capital improvements expenditures. We had, $3.1 million as a budget, and we spent $680,000. And what's the driver of the difference?
Yep. So this is actually, so without getting too much into the weeds, the capital, when we record fees, the capital improvement fees and the gen ed fees lie in the same area. And then there's an allocation that's done based on spending. So since we spent less on projects, there was a transfer from the gen ed piece to the capital improvement piece. So that's why you're seeing $680,000 being spent for the fiscal year. If you look at the third quarter, it was roughly about the same, a little bit more for the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm just comparing it to the budget amount, right? I get we spent less in the capital space. I get that,
Yeah.
to your point, there's the fees that make up, I just like to know what are the big drivers of that big difference in terms of what we budgeted to spend of 3.1 million and the actual spend of 680,000. You can just follow up with that. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I didn't have any questions on the expenditures over 20,000. It looked clean to me.
Okay. And if it's advance again and again, hop right into cash flow for FY21.
And thank you for adding the blue bar, by the way, on this. It brought me home to where we are today. So thank you.
I try to make things a little clear.
Thank you.
So we currently have about 6 million at TD Bank. We just had our first fall financial aid disbursement early October that yielded a call down of about 4.8 million. We also received our gear funds of just over 500,000. So as of right now, as you can see, through at least the first spring disbursement, we are in a solid, we've managed to stay in a solid cash position. We're projecting towards the end of the year to dip down. It looks like we're going to end up the year, assuming everything pans out the way we are trying to project it will, to be about $350,000 ending balance in TD Bank. This is a little bit less than what we would usually like to end the year off with. Usually we like to keep around $500,000 in the account towards the end of the year, at least going into the summer. But that's what we're projecting for right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, point in time, I get your point at year end, wanting to be around $500,000, but I think the periods from now till then look actually more favorable than what we typically see. So the dips and the ebbs and flows are expected, but if I recall, the dips have been much stronger than what we see here. So it's interesting that at year end it comes down, pretty considerably at that point in time. But like I said, the points in between look pretty healthy.
Yeah. Yes. Any other questions? The next slide is just your detail.
I didn't have any real questions on the detail. My only question, which really is just style. So the October 18th column, we've got some shaded in gray, the first 4 lines. Is there any particular reason to that, or is it?
Yeah, you know what that is? Every week I have run a query of our checks, and that's just for me. I time for that what I'm presenting here actually ties to what we cut for checks. So just a little reconciliation for me. We've done that for years. Maybe it's just a little darker on the screen.
No, that's fine. Yeah, given I spent a minute and a half trying to figure out what it was on my own, I figured I'd at least raise it so you can help me determine what that is. Okay, nothing for us to be concerned with. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay, I think we can keep going to the next slide. Next one. Next one. Keep going. Revenue and spending for Jason.
All right. So can we advance one more slide, please? Thank you. So just a couple of things to talk about for FY21. One of the hottest topics we've been talking about is the state appropriation and where that's going to land. As you all are probably aware, we don't have a budget finalized in the state of Massachusetts yet for FY21, but the state Ways and Means realizes the difficulties that the community colleges are having with enrollment right now, and they're really advocating and pushing for full appropriation for FY21. So as of right now, it looks like, fingers crossed, we don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like we will get the full appropriation if the projections that we have right now, follow through, which would give us an additional $1.1 million. So I guess that what's really being discussed right now is FY22. That's where the true uncertainty is with the appropriation, that we could see reductions in FY22. FY21, they're really trying to, see what kind of avenues are available as far as the rainy day fund that they could dip into, or other, buckets of money so that we could stay funded for FY21. So that is good news. And if we did receive that money, there's always needs on campus, whether it's our enrollment projection in spring being less than anticipated, we could use that money to kind of backfill. We have IT needs as far as software, infrastructure, as well as, depending on what happens with ad hoc committee, potential reinstatements of programs. So, that would be a great thing if we could get that fully funded for this year. We also have trust fund revenues. That's kind of going in the opposite direction. We originally based our budget assuming that we would be off campus for fall and back on campus for spring. Now that we know that we're working remotely for spring, we've revised our projections for that to show that we will have a little bit less revenue coming in by about $172,000. You'll also notice that we have gear funding. So we've got the $502,000 that Dorothy mentioned that we received. And then we've been notified of the $159,000 for the students. We haven't received that money yet, but we do have the letter stating that we are eligible for it. Any questions on revenues at this point? All right, let's advance to the next slide, please. All right, and so I just wanted to point out that because of our remote working, utilities, we're anticipating, conservatively $100,000 in savings for electricity, which will help offset some of our revenue as well. We can advance to the next slide. And one more, please. All right, and this just brings us back to our revenue and spending report through the end of October. And that first section just has our budget, just to kind of go over it again. Then we have our actuals in that section. The second section, the third section has our projection with just the standard 4% reduction in appropriation. And that last section has the projection with the 4% reduction that we've currently had in the appropriation, plus the 5% 9C cut, which we don't quite know if it's on the table yet. So just wanted to go over what each of those sections are. So any thoughts or questions on this?
Yeah, a couple of things for me. So going forward, I like to be able to always compare the prior year's actual versus the current year.
Sure.
Right? So somehow, some way that maybe even the first column is 2020 actual. Because yes. I found myself trying to compare the 54 million of revenue and expenses to kind of where we landed, right? So we could add that. And then also, I know we take this target percentage approach, right? So right now, essentially what it means is, for every all else being equal, every actual to budget should be at 17%, kind of means you're on track, But, okay. I'd rather us develop a year-to-date budget, because we do have seasonality, right? As we looked at the cash flows, right? Things just don't happen evenly, right? So while that's a look, I think a better look, and I think we have the ability to do it, to kind of look at what is the actual year-to-date, budget, not just compare ourselves versus our overall full year budget. And then my next question was, so to the far left, we've got this impact for sort of reduced kind of 9C.
Yes.
Impact. So are we considering this to be our worst case? So $804,000 loss. I mean, obviously we don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, going into this conversation, would you say that this 800,000 is worst case?
Based on the information that we have right now, yes, I would say that that's the worst case.
Okay, good. And then my last question is, what is the impact of the 7 discontinued programs on these numbers? So said differently, we've got either, pick a number, we got either a $538,000 good guy or we got an $800,000 bad guy. What would that have been if we hadn't taken the action of the 7 programs?
I do have a separate analysis for that. I wasn't prepared for that right now, but I'd be more than happy to get that for you if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, please. Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll follow up with that.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on this schedule? Okay.
All right, we can move to the next, please. Thank you. And then this is similar to the sheet that we saw previously, and it's got our facilities spending for the year to date so far. So we've had 388,000 in spending so far this year.
And it's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, I was just gonna say, any questions?
Oh, yeah. So is it our intent to spend down this 3.1 million? And I know we're carrying over 3 million. I mean, we know there's a lot of oddities going on with us now, but do we plan to execute on spending these funds, or are we going to find ourselves carrying over another $2.5 to $3 million next year?
I mean, the intent is always to spend it. Historically, we have always had roll forward. So I would say it is possible that we would have roll forward. We also have facilities projects, which are DCAM funded, that are happening as well, that aren't reflected on these sheets, but are, important maintenance projects that we're working on. So I can talk to facilities to get a projection for our next meeting to see kind of what they think would, be rolling forward versus spending for this year.
Yeah, no, it's a tough question for you. It is more just in general, like what is our approach to actually, looks like we've got projects in the hopper, obviously some things that'll carry over. We certainly have plenty of demand, but I'm just curious how we prioritize that demand and actually look to use the funds while we got the funds, or not use the funds, because I mean, there's a lot of things that we want to do, need to get done. And if we're gonna roll $2 to $3 million of this fund, well, if we're going to take the approach of segregating this money on paper to this portfolio and then get to the end of the year and not use it, we potentially missed an opportunity. So I'm going to make sure that we're managing this overall process the right way.
Okay. Yeah, I'll bring that to facilities to make sure that they're on board. I know, one of the things is we often have studies that take a long time before we can actually get into the project. So sometimes it's just that, the length of the project it takes to get it rolling. But I'll talk to them to get more information, because you're absolutely right. Like the sooner we get these projects done, the better.
Yeah. Even eyes on what's on what they're thinking about wanting to do with these funds, right? So it might not be approved. To your point, there may be studies that might stop us from executing, but just having an awareness of what are the things they want to focus on, and what is that priority list, and how might that priority list change would just be helpful to see, here, as opposed to staring at basically the same amount of carryover, if nothing else happened, that we saw last year, and potentially missing opportunities.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
And I'll try to get a slide for that for the next meeting as well, so you can see their list of priorities.
Okay.
I'm just not aware of it off the top of my head, but
Sure.
They do have a long list of needs and priorities. So
the list of wants is always longer than the list so we can afford. So
oh yeah,
totally makes sense. Okay. Any other financial questions of Jason or Deborah? Just
No, thank you.
great.
okay.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you both very much. Very good. Dr. Cook.
Good evening, everybody. Just a small note of gratitude. I know Jason and Dorothy are newer voices, but you have a sense, right? They are tremendous assets for this college and have been doing incredible work. So I just want to applaud them. They're bringing great capacity to really difficult, really complicated considerations at the college. So I want them to hear from me as well how much I've appreciated their work. A few things, if I could go back and pick up some of the questions that were out there. And again, really appreciate the sort of looking under the hood and helping prime for future conversations. To that question, Mac, earlier about fire escapes, if you recall, March to May, right, we were literally under a stay-at-home order. And the thinking at the time was, how bad was it going to be? And when was the next time we were going to get on campus? I mean, truly these pandemic conditions, which is why we made the call to really hold back on some of these campus-based projects. So that was really the rationale from back then, as we were in phase 0 of stay at home. And we thought, okay, let's really err on the side of caution. And obviously we do not want to have any exposure when it comes to life safety. And so that's why we've moved that forward right back in this fiscal year.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Cook.
Essentially what you have, enrollment forecasting, state appropriation forecasting, student fees and capital, really it's a sort of think out loud with this committee in particular for how you'd like the process to unfold. I think about, Mac, even your question around a worst case scenario, Jason is generous. The worst case scenario is what we don't know about enrollment. It was hard for us to even put on paper 10% in the fall, 6% in the spring. And here we are sitting at 15, 16%. And the outlook does not look promising for spring semester. Our students and faculty are not thrilled with online, even though that's really the choice. Yes, we've carved out a way for STEM to have labs on campus and particularly health programs to have their labs and clinicals. But it's really tough from the enrollment side. So I do worry about spring semester as some sort of furthering of the worst. To the question around projects, we certainly have a master plan that we can refer to for our priorities. We've got a 5-year capital plan that we can similarly look to. The one that's harder to be sure that we do well by is the IT master plan. There's about $8 million worth of unbudgeted needs there. And we're starting to try to look at that, especially when we see some of these margins a little bit more favorable for us. We also have had to staff up a little bit. As Jason rightfully pointed out, it's hard to spend money with DCAM sometimes. They make you do a certified study for any project over 300,000, and it takes months sometimes to get that study certified. So we've got to move that forward, and we do have to get some project management help to be sure that once we have that, we can quickly move forward on it. But things are hard to move quickly when it comes to some of these facilities projects. You'll see a fair bit of that tomorrow when the information for the ad hoc committee is sent out a week in advance. There's a nice map out for real needs, particularly as its impact program function under COVID and how hard those lab and clinicals are, but also the kind of facilities infrastructure investments trustees are going to be asked to consider, and whether you think the conditions are there to move forward on some of these expenses. So you're going to see that, and you'll see how quickly we can spend $1 million just in a couple of different areas. So you'll see that level of specificity. And again, great appreciation for Dorothy, Jason, Ed Rutkowski, our interim CFO, for really helping connect with Deb Avery in facilities, Mary Kozlowski in IT, on firming up these. These are not guesstimates. There are some real numbers because these are real project needs for us. So we'll get to that. Even the state appropriation, again, if we somehow get this, I hate to use sort of strong apocryphal words, but it will be a miracle if we are in fact level funded. I think we have seen a groundswell of advocacy around trying to help preserve public higher education, at least level funded. To say how hard this is, I mean, here we are in November and we don't really have a formalized budget. And you see all the signs are encouraging, but we may be into January before we actually see joy on a true budget. And that's fiscal year 21. All that is to say, I don't know how to even try to project what fiscal year 22 will look like from a state support, much less how we put a placeholder in our budget, how we then think about enrollment forecasting, and then even the student fee attached to that. Because as we know, without some kind of approval from trustees come July 1 of next year, we can't spend money. So we're going to need to get something in place. As a reminder, right, the typical process, you would see a draft in March, you would see a draft in April, and then we would formalize things in May, giving us June. Just as we did this past year, we used June as that sort of buffer to give ourselves one more look. By all means, we can look in January, February, and certainly March with drafts. I really want to sort of get your insight, your ideas, your process for how you would like the budget building to unfold for next fiscal year. It seemed prudent to already ask now.
Yeah, I'd have to give that some thought, Dr. Cook. I mean, right off the cuff, I wouldn't see any reason to do anything different. The timing is what it is, right? I mean, I don't know if we're going to know anything different in January versus what we would know in March, and I wouldn't want to spend good effort after bad effort, right? Or I should say, good effort after wasted effort. So I would be more inclined to just keep our prior cadence in terms of, because we're talking about this stuff all the time. It's not like it's something that we're not all well aware of, and it is not top of mind. So even though you talk about different topics here, I think we're all kind of honed in on, okay, what's really going to happen going forward. None of us really know, right? So I think in terms of looking at a first cut budget, I think when we get to the March timeframe, certainly you'll know better kind of where things will shake out, and I think that would kind of help us, be much more focused as opposed to looking at things in January when things are so much more in flux.
That outlook is really helpful, everyone. And a few sort of pieces to sort of keep in mind, because we do have some plans now that really help us have a reference, have a starting point that we didn't necessarily have in the past. As I mentioned, a 5-year plan, a master plan, IT plans. These are really helpful tools for us. I think about it this way, especially given the conversations we've had about ad hoc and program support. There's some version where as we get in here, the idea of probably choice points, if you will, priorities that the trustees yourself can help focus on. So that may look like multiple reserve requests for next year for some priority projects. It's the idea that we haven't been able to quite get to the deferred maintenance, right? That there is not just a backlog, but that has really impacted program function. And to avoid that, we may need your true assistance to help move those things forward necessarily. We'll know hopefully where we are with Building 20 and what kind of support trustees may be asked to help with or contribute to be sure that thing moves forward, because that is still hanging out there and is a significant concern. I also, for good measure, just look around the corner with me. What if there's true Fed money, right? The idea of if all of a sudden you hear in the news that with the election results that there's going to be federal stimulus that gets passed on and we have a windfall of $10 million. I'm coming right to trustees and this group in particular and say, here are all the priorities. Help us figure out how this gets spent, because we can spend 10 million in a heartbeat. And it looks like this. We can't use our green right now for anyone under the age of 18. There's a small little strip that, based on lead testing, allows for the child care center to still function. But otherwise you can't be 18 or under on that green. We've got the study back. We got the certified study, minimum of 600,000 for mitigation, upwards of 2.5 million. Now, the National Park Service may be able to help underwrite or offset some of that, given monies that they may get. I'll need your help to decide how much does the college take on, because right now we don't have a functional green because of the lead contamination. It's classic, unfortunate stick dilemmas like that are going to be the things that I'm going to need help with, because we're spending somewhere between 600,000 and 2.5 million just on the green, which arguably doesn't directly help the teaching and learning process, right? Nevertheless, we're going to have to address that one way or the other, one day eventually.
Yep. Look forward to those conversations.
Other questions for me otherwise?
Dr. Cook, have you, with the news about Operation Warp Speed producing a virus vaccine with 90% efficacy, have you sort of thought about what that might look like in terms of the college and what a comeback plan would look like with once the vaccine starts being released?
Yeah, I would say I'm still worried, Eric, that what I read on things like that is that's a press release, right? They haven't showed the research on that, and there's all those issues around how much research are they doing to find this whole thing. Then what the caution always is then you first have to, even if it is even if they find that the efficacy and all the other terms they use are right there, they first need to do frontline employees. Then they have to do, people in high risk populations. My worry, as we've sort of had to become better public health professionals with all this, is really down the road is that we have a fall semester next year that at best, maybe we can be 50-50 on campus. That might be at best. Remember how much we've pivoted. We were 15% online last fall. We're 80% online this fall. That's a stunning turn of events, and full credit to faculty who developed online classes, not remote, online, with a whole map for how they were going to tackle that. I see, especially with the protocols, if there's a version of protocols in place as they're trying to walk this vaccine out, where we still have to mask, we still have to socially distance, and therefore it lowers the number of people we can have gather in a space. That's what we come up against. And that's why until we can really get to full capacity on campus, the ability to host, the community college student is still going to stay home. That's what we saw. And that's the research we see with community colleges, right, Eric, is that our students are sitting on the sidelines. They're saying, I'm not going anywhere, much less STCC. I'm going to wait till I can get back on campus. And they're not the type of student who's going to pay to sit in a dorm and do their class remote.
But I think it would bear fleshing out the, sort of what a projection plan might look like once a vaccine is released. It's something that obviously you're going to have to, all the state colleges are going to have to get together and really kind of talk about this. But if it hasn't already been done, perhaps you can, maybe lead the charge. But, is it 3 months? Is it 9 months? Is it 18 months? What should we anticipate, once a vaccine is released in terms of, what that looks like? Like you said, do you bring it on, 80-20, and then so many months later move, into a more face-to-face environment? But I think that the teachers should be, if they're not already, should be among the first to be vaccinated, because they want them to be vaccinated with they are frontline workers. The damage that we're doing for youth by not educating them, or educating them in a fashion that perhaps no one really understands yet. We're learning fast. Is a virus in and of itself. So anyway, I'm just thinking ahead as to what that might look like when an ultimate vaccine is finally released.
Yep. Governor Baker has issued an executive order that all of us working in higher education have to have a flu vaccine by the end of December. So there are some small measures like that we are attending to, right, to try to help keep people healthy. And also, please know that I meet still once a week with all Massachusetts community college presidents. We still gather that way, and there's a tremendous amount of cross-fertilization, comparing of notes, practices, all that. So for sure, we are part, if you will, of the larger whole thinking about these things.
Great. Any other questions of Dr. Cook? Okay, thank you, Dr. Cook. And there's no old business, any new business? Okay, hearing none. Before we adjourn, our next meeting is January 11th. So I want to say to those of you that I might not speak to before then, happy holidays to you and your family and friends. Try to stay healthy, stay distant, but do what you need to do to kind of get through it. It'll certainly be odd for all of us, but certainly do what you can to stay safe. I also want to correct myself. I call Dorothy Deborah. And so I apologize, Dorothy. So right. So I do want to say thank you to you and to Jason for a job very well done and going over the results. I do echo what Dr. Hook said about kind of certainly what I've seen in the materials and then what I've seen here in the conversation. Job very well done. And with that, I'd like to call have a roll taken to adjourn the meeting. Nene, if you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Mary Kate Murin.
Yes.
Max Starks.
Yes.
Vicky Kraus, Eric Hagopian,
Yes.
Maurice Lindsay,
Yes.
Jeff Sattler, and Janae McDonald.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you, Nene. Great. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So long, everyone.